Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Toyzilla's Book Club with me, Toyzilla. How y'all doing? Alright, so y'all know we're still reading The Looking Glass Wars by Frank Bader. And like I tell y'all each time, as we're reading together and learning together, if I happen to pronounce a few words, well, wrong, y'all will nicely let me know. Sometimes, if I get tongue tied, I'll go back and read some things. But we're having fun together, enjoying the story together. If you happen to do any artwork of what you hear, well, of what's in your heart, like about what we're reading and stuff, I would love to see it. If you guys would want to send it in, like just let me know in the comments and I will tell you. So today we're going to be reading chapters 46 and 47, a little short, because kind of not feeling too well, but I feel like reading what might make me feel a little bit better. But we don't want to read too much. During our video game portion of the stream, I got a little motion sick, and I don't know, but that's for a different story. Now, if you're just now tuning in and you haven't read any of the chapters before, go ahead to our YouTube channel, search Toyzilla, find our bear bot symbol, and you can find the rest of the chapters there. Now, if y'all find that my videos aren't really doing it for you, maybe they're not up to par, maybe some chapters I just gloved it up completely, let me know and I will reread them for you. After all, if y'all can't understand what I'm saying, how are we going to enjoy the story together? We don't. It's just that simple. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and start reading, shall we? Okay, let's see. All right, now, chapter 46. It was a long, exhausting journey without the ease of travel once afforded by the crystal continuum. Not wanting to risk further encounters with Jabberwocky, the Allisons skirted the volcanic plains, and luckily, though strangely considering Red's usual aggregation, their trek was uneventful. They hadn't seen a single glass-eyed or card soldier, just the occasional flock of seekers circling high overhead. They stood gathered at the base of an abandoned building, gazing out at a dingy Wondertropolis alley. "Where is it?" General Doppelganger asked. "There." Hatter pointed as two Wonderlanders tripped up the front steps of a basement tavern and stumbled into the alley drunk. "That's the place?" General Doppelganger asked. "It looks more than a bit unsavory." "It's the only place I know," Hatter said. He cast a studious eye over his confederates. Bidwit in his scholar's robe, the General, Dodge, and Alice in their Allison uniforms. No amount of camouflage could hide the fact that they were not average Wonderlanders. Still, they didn't have to bring unnecessary attention to themselves by flaunting their rebel colors. So Hatter folded his top hat into a stack of deadly blades and placed it in his inside coat pocket. He removed his coat and draped it over his arm. "Ready?" he asked. Alice nodded, conjured hooded cloaks for herself and the others, and Allisons crossed the alley and entered the tavern. They paused in the doorway to let their eyes adjust to the gloom, giving the bartender and the toothless old smuggler at the counter an opportunity to size them up. The rest of the patrons were too absorbed in their drink to notice the newcomers, slumped half-conscious on their tattered bar stools or passed out altogether. "We don't have to put ourselves on display, do we?" Dodge said. "Let's sit down." They had hardly settled around the nearest table when the bartender jerked his head toward a corner of the tavern, and out of the vacuous dark stepped a girl wearing a Homburg hat and a long overcoat, not unlike Hatter's. She approached the Allisons to take their order. The shy girl I saw at camp, who brought tea when I had my first talk with Bibwit. You? Bibwit said, surprised. Me, the girl confirmed. But how did I don't. It was the first time any of them had seen Bibwit Hart at a loss for words. My child, he said, recovering himself. I don't know how you survived the raid on our camp, and of course it's pleasing to discover you, as it would be pleasing to find any of us alive. But what are you doing here? You're too young to be working in a place like this. I'm 13. Old enough, I think, and lucky to be working at all. Alice glanced at Dodge, and the questioning, slightly perturbed expression on his face told her that they were thinking the same thing. Is this who we're supposed to meet? It must be. It's too much of a coincidence. But the girl was so young, not at all what Alice had been expecting. How well do you know the city? General Doppelganger asked. The girl shrugged. Better than most. Hatter caught sight of a vein in the shape of an H below her left ear. His face hardened. She's a halfer. Civilian and millinery spawn. Not to be trusted. Hatter, Bidwood began. I don't need your trust, the girl said. I serve the princess, if she'll let me. Ooh. With a bow too subtle for those around them to notice, she directly addressed Alice for the first time. Humbug Molly, at your service, princess. Alice dipped her head in response. We are looking for a certain puzzle shop. Do you know of it? I think I do. How can we be sure you won't lead us into a trap? The question came from Hatter. You can't. Hatter, I don't think we need fear the girl, said Bibwood Hart. And judging by the looks we're getting from the other patrons, we could use a friend in this place. The longer the Allisons remained in the tavern, the more the regulars woke from their alcohol dreams and squinted menacingly at them. Allisons were not welcome. The toothless smuggler heaved himself away from the bar and hurried out, glaring at them. I wonder where he could be going, Dodge said, sarcastic. If you're afraid, Molly said to Hatter, you can stay here. Afraid? It happens to everyone. Keep it lively, you, the bartender shouted. You better order something, Molly said. Bring us whatever will keep you out of trouble, Bibbit said. Molly went to fetch the order and received an earful of abuse from the bartender for her so-called laziness, he filling 5 cracked mugs with frothy, steaming brew all the while. Bibwit shook his head. What sort of world is it when a youngster must become a barmaid in a place like this to survive? She's a halfer, Hatter repeated, as if the fact in itself was enough to ward them off the girl. We had halfers at the Allison headquarters, Hatter, said General Doppelganger. After the millinery went down, several members lived with us for a time. Many halfers were born under our care. They're not as disloyal as you suppose. Their only duty is to their own self-interest. She says she knows the puzzle shop, Alice said, and the table fell silent. She's the only one the caterpillar could have met. Look around. There is no one else. Assuming this is the place the caterpillar meant for us to go, Dodge said. But Alice had made up her mind. This was the place. Humbug Molly was the one. It is, she said. Molly returned with their drinks and began setting them on the table. You see that poster over there, Princess? The one for Red's Hotel and Casino? Yes. It's a false wall. Behind it is a way out. We use it whenever we're raided. The cut is already on its way. Thanks to our friend with no teeth, Dot said. Indeed, A division of the cut was at the moment rounding the corner into the alley, led by the toothless smuggler. The unmistakable rasping of the card soldiers marching, steel like legs, echoed off the buildings. By the time it was heard inside the tavern, it was almost too late. The cut burst in, and suddenly sober patrons overturned tables and trampled one another in their efforts to flee. Fighting broke out. Dodge, Bibwit, General Doppelganger, and Hatter formed a circle around Alice, the first three with their swords drawn. Hatter with his wrist blade spinning. Humbug Molly steered them through the brawling soldiers and patrons, ducking to avoid the reach of pummeling fists, her Humbug flattened into a razor-edged disc to shield her from the soldiers' swords. Dink! Clank! Pong! In close formation, the 13-year-old guided the Allisons to the false wall, down a dank tunnel, and safely outside. The street was quiet, no hint of the violence from which they had just escaped. It could have been an ordinary night in Wondertropolis. Molly kept walking calmly, continued down the street, knowing exactly where she was going. The Allisons stood watching her until the girl stopped and turned to them. "Well, come on if you're coming." Chapter 47. Emerald Drive was one of the oldest streets in the capital. In Genevieve's time and before, it had been a grand thoroughfare of upscale shops and restaurants, but the wealthy and privileged gradually moved elsewhere as the surrounding streets became havens for looter gangs, imagination-stimulant manufacturers, and wonderlanders engaged in other illicit but profitable employment. The squalor had at last reached its fingers into Emerald Drive itself, and the once celebrated promenade was now indistinguishable from the scum-heavy streets around it. At scattered points along the drive's ruined glory, the homeless warmed themselves around pits glowing with fire crystals, their mumbled conversations brought to a pause by the sight of a strange array of wonderlanders approaching a shop that hadn't been open for business in many lunar cycles. Zulzul's Anne was all that remained of the sign that had once declared the shop's wares. Its massive front door, through which two spirit dames could have easily passed side by side, was locked. The single front window was covered with dust and revealed nothing. Dodge pounded on the door. "I doubt anyone's in," General Doppelganger said. Bibwood's ears twitched. "I hear trouble." Paler than usual, the tutor removed the sword from beneath his robe and gripped it with two hands. It wasn't long before they all heard it. The dark sky turned darker as Red's moon was eclipsed by a screaming swarm of seekers. The homeless wonderlanders scattered as "Creech! The seekers attacked!" Dodge, Alice, Bibwit, and the general slashed at the creatures with their swords, while Hatter sent his top hat blades into the thick of them. Thimp, 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 thimp. The blades sliced through the flock, wounding and killing several, and returned to him. Molly flicked her own hat flat and used it as both shield and offensive weapon, digging its sharpened edges into the alien creatures when they shot toward her out of the sky with their hungry insect mouths. "Ah!" One of them swiped Dodge on the shoulder, knocking him to the ground and sending his sword clanking out of reach. The seeker circled, was coming in for the kill with its talons drawn when someone kicked Dodge's sword back to him. "Seek this!" Dodge hissed through clenched jaws, stabbing the beast. He rolled away from the creature as it writhed in its death throes, saw the Rook and White Knight battling alongside him, together with a small platoon of surviving chessmen. "Hope you don't mind us always showing up unannounced like this," the Rook said. "We followed the seekers," explained the White Knight. Next to each other now, standing, Dodge and the Rook whirled, aiming their swords skyward just in time for an attacking seeker to impale itself on them and perish with a hideous howl. A division of Red's cut appeared at the end of Emerald Drive. A few of the card soldiers were armed with 80-52s, automatic dealers capable of shooting razor-sharp projectiles the size and shape of ordinary playing cards at the rate of 52 per second. Hardly had the soldiers rounded the corner and spotted the Allisons when a four-card let loose with a spray of razor cards. "Incoming!" General Doppelganger shouted. The Allisons dropped face down in the street, all except Alice and Humbug Molly, who flattened themselves against the front of the puzzle shop as the first of the razor cards sliced past. Hatter jumped in front of them and with his wrist blades activated his arm, moving in a blur, knocked the rest of the razor cards to the ground. Whew. Another round of 80-52 fire quickly followed, but this time Alice closed her eyes and tilted her head back, and the deadly cards passed overhead and to either side. The Allisons were in an invisible protective bubble, courtesy of Alice's imagination. Zipping overhead, the razor cards cut into many of the seekers, and the beasts' lifeless bodies raining down on the Allisons and landing with a splat on the pavement. With Red's cut closing in, Hatter hurled his top hat blades at the puzzle shop window. Hitting the glass, the blades rotated and cut a hole large enough for Alice to fit through. "Go!" he shouted. General Doppelganger split into Generals Doppel and Ganger, swords held at the ready. Dodge glared at the advancing card soldiers, his words directed at Alice. "We'll keep them busy. You just find the maze." "But there are too many. Even with the chessmen, we're outnumbered." Humbug Molly tugged at her sleeve. No choice but to go. Before Alice followed Molly into the shop, she imagined the 80-52s plugged up, useless, and could only hope her imagining had been successful. Before she didn't wait around to find out. She dived through the window and into the shop, as was perhaps appropriate for any shop specializing in the sale of puzzles and games. This one was itself built in the shape of a puzzle. Handcrafted bookshelves were arranged to form a simple maze. Alice and Humbug Molly ran up and down the narrow passages, but found nothing. Every shelf was bare. They began toppling bookcases, opening every cabinet, trapdoor, and dummy window they came across. "What are we looking for?" Molly yelled. Alice could barely hear her over the battle noise from outside. "I don't know." But then a bluish twinkle, a twink of color, light, caught her eye. She looked up and saw it, on the edge of the tallest bookcase in the shop, a glowing crystal cube. "Up there! I'll get it." Molly didn't climb more than halfway up the bookcase before it tilted, started to fall. She jumped to the ground, scurrying out of harm's way, but the crystal cube was in the air, falling hard and fast. "No!" Alice screamed. The princess leaped, arms outstretched, as the bookcase crashed to the ground and splintered apart. But she'd caught it. The crystal cube was safe. Alice turned it over in her hands, looking for a clue as to how it worked. "What am I supposed to—" The shop door imploded, and still holding on to the radiant cube, Alice fell back through a looking glass painted to appear like part of a wall. The fighting had spilled into the shop, but floating weightless inside the looking glass, Wonderland's rightful princess saw the battle scene freeze, stopped in time. There was Dodge with his sword raised attacking a 2-card. There was Hatter in mid-air, the saber blades of his belt open to fight 3-card soldiers at once, a pair of 4s and a 2. There were the generals come to help Bidwit, who had somehow lost hold of his sword, and there was Humbug Molly, staring wide-eyed at the spot where the princess had fallen through the looking glass. Alice saw it all as if through a watery film, and despite the mortal threat she and the Allisons were facing, despite the uncertainty of everything, she felt almost serene as she drifted down into the looking glass maze. And that's the end of chapter 47, everybody. Once again, I thank y'all joining me for reading a couple chapters every now and again. And this has been tonight's episode of Toyzilla's Book Club. Now again, and while y'all are reading along with me, I hope that some of you guys make some artwork that you might want to send in so we can turn this chapter book into a picture book. Now, y'all know our normal streaming schedule. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We do our bout of video games, and then afterwards, we film a couple chapters of book club where I join you guys. But if you don't want to wait to read the chapters live, you can find them here on the YouTube channel. Remember, search Toyzilla and look for that bear bot symbol. And as always, remember, reading is fun. The mental. That's also fun too, but I just like saying the fundamental thing. But all right now, thank you everybody. It has been a pleasure. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Goodbye now. Toyzilla is out.